As a church, over the last few weeks, we have been thinking together about the book in the New Testament of the Bible called 1 Timothy. The letter was most likely written by the Apostle Paul to Timothy. Timothy was a younger man who'd worked alongside Paul and has now been sent to a growing church in Ephesus. Paul himself hoped to come and help lead that church, but he's been delayed, and so Timothy's left in charge. Paul here is writing to Timothy and indeed to the wider church to help them in the running of the church, to help Timothy as he learns to lead, to help all of them to learn to grow together as the body of Christ. And we've thought together about God's call on Timothy's life. He is to lead with love. We've considered what God is calling each one of us to do and how we might fulfill our own callings in love. We've looked at how the church was to worship together, to come together in the name of Jesus to praise him, but also to turn every aspect of their lives to glorifying God, that he might be worshipped in all we do. A few weeks back, Vera led us in thinking about how we choose our leaders, what sort of people they should be, and how we can all strive for those same characteristics. 2 weeks ago, I talked about how Paul asks Timothy to set a good example, to be someone that others will look up to rather than down on, to prove by his actions that he is called and empowered by God. I reminded each one of us that we too are called to set an example for one another so that we can encourage each other to be godly, and to set an example for those who do not yet know the Lord so that they can see what he is like. This week we're going to be thinking about 1 Timothy 5, particularly the first part, which is mostly about caring for the most vulnerable in church, the widows in this case. And then next week we conclude our journey through 1 Timothy by considering godliness and contentment. But first here, Timothy is commanded to care and to enable the church to care. He's commanded to set up a system for the church to care. This week in the UK, a campaign headed up by the Manchester United footballer Marcus Rashford convinced our government to provide free school meals for children from the poorest families in our nation. This is an extension of a programme that began more than 100 years ago. In 1906, when local authorities were encouraged to provide free school meals in an attempt to improve the health of the nation. And after the First World War, a whole raft of other provisions were put in place as well to help the poorest among us as our nation tried to recover from the war. And they were further extended at the end of the Second World War, most famously with the birth of the NHS, providing healthcare for everyone, not just those who could afford it. Most of the richest nations in our world have some sort of welfare system providing for people in need. And these systems vary wildly, but often they include care for the unemployed and disabled, retired people, those with small children, people who are out of work or unable to work. Essentially, at least in theory, they are there to support those who are most in need. My guess is that most of you have, at some time or another, availed yourselves of our welfare system, whether it be using the NHS, drawing a state pension, or receiving tax credits or universal credit. Many of you have contributed as well by paying taxes over many years, which are then used in part to provide for others. Some parts of our welfare system are relatively straightforward to access. The NHS and state pension, they're not too complicated. But I must say from first-hand experience that once you get into applying for means-tested support, it can get really confusing. I'm pretty sure you need an advanced degree in complex thought to properly fill out tax credit forms. And I understand the reason they're so complicated, though. It's an attempt to make sure that the right amount of support goes to the right people, goes to the people who need it most. And that's also what Paul is trying to achieve in 1 Corinthians 4. Paul's talking about widows, and maybe we need to put in a little background. It was common practice in those days, and had been for many years, hundreds of years, for a woman's father to pay her husband a dowry when she got married. And the purpose of the dowry was to make sure that she was financially supported for her whole life. Remember, younger women were often married to men who were older, and so it was common for a woman to outlive her husband. And when she did, the dowry would be passed on to her son to manage if she had any sons. And they would then use it to support her in her old age. And if she had no sons, the money would revert to her father's household, who would then use it in the same way. This is partly why it became important to have sons, because women were not able to support themselves in the same way men were. The sources of income open to women were often either considered immoral or they wouldn't have paid well. And so widows without a husband to bring in money were potentially some of the poorest and most vulnerable people in society. They needed to be cared for. And it's not something that has just occurred to Paul at this point. This support runs throughout Scripture, that the poorest in society should be cared for. Deuteronomy 10 says, "For the Lord your God is the God of God and Lords of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing." Later, in the same book, there's a provision made that from every harvest some should be given to Levites, those who served in the temple, to the widows, to the orphans and to foreigners. Exodus 22 forbids mistreating or exploiting these vulnerable groups. From the start, in this law given to Moses, when Israel wasn't even yet a nation, God commanded care for those most in need. That the least able to provide for themselves, widows, orphans, foreigners, should be provided for by others. And Paul is simply continuing that care, that provision here. But Paul is really specific about who should and who shouldn't be supported by the church. In this chapter, there are 3 groups. We'll do them in reverse order. The last group he mentions are younger widows who may be able to remarry. And part of Paul's concern seems to be that there are some women in the church, younger women particularly, who've turned to prostitution. And they shouldn't also be financially supported by the church. He's also concerned that young women who might be able to support themselves won't even try to support themselves if the church is providing all their needs for them. The second group are those who have children or grandchildren. And in this case, the widow's family should be encouraged in no uncertain terms to provide for her. Many of them will have a dowry in order to do just this. Part of the duty of family, part of honouring father and mother, would be to provide for them. And then there's the final group, those who are really in need, the older widows with no family. These should be added to the list and supported by the church community. It's quite a detailed plan that Paul lays out, and the details themselves are not too important to us. We shouldn't be using Paul's criteria to work out who in our churches we need to support. What the details do tell us is that we need to do the best we can with the limited resources we have. We need to think clearly about how what we have can be used for those who need it most. It would be wonderful if the church could finance the lives of everyone. If it didn't matter what category of widow you were in, if everyone could get an allowance. But the money pot in the church in Ephesus, and indeed in our church today, is not endless. And so therefore it's those who are most in need, those who are least able to find support elsewhere, that should be the priority. Let's think about how we apply this to our own circumstances. We don't need to go out and start asking widows whether or not they're over 60. We do need to think about these questions. Who am I responsible for? Who are we responsible for? What should we expect of them? Who am I responsible for? Who are we responsible for? And what should we expect of them? There is an expectation from Paul that family members should care for one another. And in most cultures across the world and throughout generations, families have lived in close proximity to one another. Generations, children, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents have all shared homes or lived close to one another in the same village, in houses next door. And supporting family members in these circumstances is really easy. If you all live together, whatever money comes into the home from those who can and do work is there to support those who cannot. It's much more difficult, I think, in our society where we might live some distance away, where elderly parents are often reluctant to relocate to be close to family or to move to a place where more support can be provided, where none of us are willing to uproot our lives often. However, all that being said, the facts are that Paul writes that where possible, family members should be the first line of defence, as it were, when it comes to caring for those in need. It doesn't mean that the church doesn't have a role to play, but it means that, again, where possible, the financial burden should not fall on the church. And so the answer to the question, who am I responsible for, I guess, is that I am responsible for those members of my family who I can realistically care for. And what this means is that the church's resources can be freed up for those without family support, for whatever reason. And I guess that's the answer to the next question. The next question is, who are we responsible for? Throughout the Bible, we are shown a God who is concerned for the poorest, for the most vulnerable, for those who have no access to justice, those who are outcast and shunned. And as we see this pattern of care in Scripture, we too are called to imitate it. We should ask ourselves, who in our church family is in most need of support? Who in our community are in most need of support? Who are the poor and the outcast? Who are the widows in our world today? These are the ones that we are commanded to care for. However, and this is important, there are also expectations of those who receive the care, who are supported. Paul writes of it. It's not just a charity, a handout with no strings attached, no relationship implied. The kind of care and support that Paul is talking about involves input from the widows themselves. They are supported financially by the church, but they are called to serve the church family. She's called to devote herself to good deeds, to help those in trouble, to show hospitality. This is wonderful, I think, because instead of leaving someone feeling worthless, they can't do anything, they just have to be given everything. Yes, we give and support, but we also provide worth and dignity. That those women are given something constructive, something wonderful to do, where they can be a blessing to the church as well as being blessed by it. The church might be supporting the most needy financially, but the needy among us are called as well to support the church in 1,000 practical ways. And the aim is for all of us to grow together and glorify Christ in whatever way we can. And to maybe try and achieve something like the very early church, where we are told that there are no needy people among them. As God's people, we are commanded, just like the church in Ephesus, to care for the poorest, those most in need in our midst. Sometimes, like Paul, we are going to need to be quite strict about how to do this. Church finances, after all, are not bottomless. But the ultimate goal is for us as a church family to generously support and care for one another. Financially, where it's finance that's needed, in service and care where that is what's needed, and that's what we have to provide. So I urge you, let us all be generous, and let us look to those in need with compassion and care.